Hello friends, this is Jennifer Terri and welcome to my channel. In this video, we will talk about mandatory quarantine hotel versus stringent quarantine hotel versus stringent quarantine facility. Yeah, so we'll talk about the three types of quarantine facilities that you need to stay at when arriving in the Philippines. But before we proceed, if you are not subscribed to the channel, please click that subscribe button below if you want to stay updated with the travel rules and updates in the Philippines, because that's what we do in this channel. So without further ado, let's go to the video. So, the Philippine government has been implementing quarantine and testing procedures for passengers arriving in the Philippines ever since this pandemic has started. And all arriving passengers in the Philippines must undergo the COVID test and quarantine. So even if you're vaccinated, even if you're coming from a country without any COVID case, or even if you're pregnant or you are a senior citizen, you will be required to undergo COVID testing and quarantine. Now, there are actually just two types of quarantine facilities that passengers could be subjected to. The first one is the stringent quarantine, and the next one is the mandatory quarantine. So the type of quarantine will be determined by which country you come from and through a special screening procedures that will be conducted by government health professionals upon arrival in the Philippines. So don't waste your money booking on the wrong type of quarantine facility, okay? If you have any plans of traveling to the Philippines or if you have any upcoming flight to the Philippines, stay with me so you know which quarantine facility you should stay at. The first one is the stringent quarantine hotel. So the stringent quarantine hotel, this is for those passengers coming from the 35 banned countries, okay? If you're a Filipino or dual Filipino citizen coming from any of the 35 restricted country, you will have to undergo your quarantine and stay in a stringent quarantine hotel, okay? And who else needs to stay in a stringent quarantine hotel? Passengers with flu-like symptoms or COVID-like symptoms, so based on the assessment of a health officer at the airport. So when you arrive in the Philippines, everyone will be assessed, and if you have any COVID symptoms like flu, difficulty of breathing, you have a temperature, you could be subjected to stay in a stringent quarantine. And who else? For sea-based overseas Filipino workers, those coming from a high-risk vessel. So again, let's review. Those coming from the 35 banned countries, and those who have COVID-like symptoms, and sea-based overseas Filipino workers coming from a high-risk vessel. So they are the ones required to stay in a stringent quarantine hotel. Okay, now that it's clear, those coming from a banned country will have to undergo 14 days quarantine in the stringent hotel. So regardless of a negative COVID result, so let's say even if your result comes out negative on the second day of your quarantine, it doesn't mean that it's finished. You can now leave. No, you must finish your 14 days stringent quarantine, even if you have already tested negative. Yeah, so that is the new rule because of this new variant. This has been introduced. Now, also take note, I've already mentioned this in my last video, but also remember that the first day of your arrival will not be counted in the 14 days quarantine. So the first day again is not counted on the quarantine period. So your total stay in the stringent quarantine hotel could be up to 15 days. Now before we proceed with the list of stringent hotel, know that if you are a passenger coming from the banned country and you choose to stay in the stringent hotel of your own choice, you will have to pay for that, okay? You will have to shoulder the cost of your 14-day stay in that stringent hotel. Again, 14 days hotel stay, you'll have to pay for it. Now, if you are in a tight budget and cannot afford, or if you can't afford to pay for the 14 days quarantine, stay with me because there is another option and we'll talk about that later. And for OFWs, those who are registered with OWA, it is free. Yes, free po para sa inyo yung Stringent Hotel. The OWA will arrange everything for you. When you arrive in the Philippines, you'll be ushered in a Stringent Hotel. You'll stay there for 14 days until you finish that 14 days. And then after that, transportation will be paid by the government. Okay, this is for OFWs. They are very well taken care of, the government. But for those non-OFWs, you are not members of OWA, you'll have to pay your own cost of the Stringent Hotel. So that's 14 days hotel stay you'll have to pay plus food. Now, going back to the Stringent Hotel, let's go to the complete list of accredited Stringent hotels that you can choose from. So, for the complete list of the Stringent Quarantine hotels, let's go to the website of the Bureau of Quarantine. So, luckily, the list was just updated today. This was just posted today, January 18, 2021. So, when you open the site, you will see, let's zoom in. The first one is mandatory quarantine. So don't book from any of these hotels. This is not the Stringent Quarantine. So you'll have to do a long scroll. Scroll. Quite a long scroll because there are more mandatory quarantine than Stringent hotels. Now here we are. Facility suitable for Stringent Quarantine. Okay, so this is where you need to book. So there's a long list, and the good news actually is that they've added Stringent hotels, because last time this was only 128. Now there are, let's see, there are now 136 Stringent hotels you can choose from. Looking for an affordable Stringent hotel, I know Go Hotel is cheap. This Go Hotel is cheap. I've heard of Aloha Hotel too before. Yeah, that's what I can mention for now. All for this list of Stringent hotels. You can do your scrolling and research. Yeah, so make sure that if you are coming from a banned country and you are arriving in the Philippines on or before January 31, or God knows how long this travel ban will last, you have to book in a Stringent Quarantine hotel. So that is all for the Stringent Quarantine hotel. Now let's move forward to the second type of quarantine facility, and that is the Mandatory Quarantine hotel. Now this one is the most known type, everybody knows of. So because of the ban, those coming from the 35 banned countries can't stay here, all right? So we know now that you cannot book here if you are coming from the 35 countries. So who can stay here then? So the mandatory quarantine hotel is for those other passengers arriving in the Philippines and coming from a country that is not under the travel ban. So for example, New Zealand, Mexico. And this is also for those who have no COVID-like symptoms, no COVID exposure, And this is also for those who are coming from a country that is not under the travel ban, but they are transiting in a banned country. So let's say, for example, you are a Filipino and you went to Maldives and you transited in Dubai. Let's say in Dubai airport, you only stayed inside the airport. You didn't leave the Dubai airport, and you didn't get clearance from the Dubai immigration. Then you can stay in the mandatory quarantine, okay? You don't have to do the 14 days quarantine in a Stringent hotel, okay? If you merely transit in a banned country. Now, same with the Stringent hotel, mandatory quarantine also is your own choice, and there is a long list of mandatory quarantine hotels that you can choose from. And again, for overseas Filipino workers, OFWs, those who are registered with OWA, you are free. this is free for you. You don't have to pay for it. Even the food is free for you. The transport is free for you. Now, for the affordable quarantine hotels, I made a video about that. Check this video out. I won't tell you which one is an affordable. You have to go to that video if you are looking for an affordable quarantine hotel. And also a reminder that in the quarantine, only maximum of 2 people can stay in one room. So if you want to be staying with another person, that other person has to be a relative, or you must be traveling together and you must have the same address. You know, this is for families like couples or parent and child or sisters. So you'll have to check with your hotel, because we had one subscriber last month. She was traveling with her family. It was a family of 4, so the husband and wife and 2 children. And she was asking me whether they could quarantine in one room. I wasn't sure at that time. She inquired with her hotel, and it was then she was told that they could stay in one quarantine, but they would have to book a studio type quarantine room so they could stay together. Okay, again, only maximum of 2 people, and you have to be related. Of course, when there are children involved, I think there will be exemptions. Let's keep moving. Now, for the mandatory quarantine, since you are coming from a country that is not under the travel ban, you will only have to stay in the mandatory quarantine for 1 to 2 days only, especially if you're a non OFW. COVID test result now is pretty fast. For most people, it only takes a day and then the result comes out. For some, even not even a day. For the complete and updated list of mandatory quarantine hotels, let's go to the website of the Bureau of Quarantine. So here's the list, guys. I'll have this link in the description box, don't worry, so you can have a look, and also put it in the comment section. So here is the facilities for mandatory quarantine. Again, this was just updated today, January 18. Very updated tong list na to. So, it's quite a long list. You have so many options. You can stay in a affordable hotel like Sogo. Sogo Hotels is cheap. And you can also stay in, fancy hotels. There's a lot of options for you. There's Sogo Hotels. Yeah. So you guys have a look. Again, if you wanted to know the affordable hotels for your quarantine, mandatory quarantine, I already made a video. Check it out. I'm going to put the link in the description box. So how many mandatory quarantine hotels are there? There are more. Let's see. How many? There's 222 mandatory quarantine hotels. So that is the 2 type of quarantine facility, the stringent quarantine and the mandatory quarantine. And this last one is not a type actually, but I just wanted to share the one I promised earlier. So for those coming from the 35 banned countries and who have to do their 14 days stringent quarantine, if you're in a tight budget, there is another option for you. If you don't want to pay, there is a stringent quarantine government facility. Okay, so this one is offered by the government for those coming from the 35 banned countries and need to quarantine for 14 days. The good thing about it is this is free. Yes, you heard me right. This is free. Food is free, and even airport to hotel transfer is free. However, this is subject to availability. So this is subject to availability again. Okay, in case where the government free government facility reaches full capacity, travelers must prepare to shoulder their accommodation in one of the hotels suitable for the 14-day stringent quarantine that we talked about earlier. Meaning, you need to bring money just in case that the government facility gets full. Anyway, that is just an option for you. Some reassurance that if you don't have the money to pay for the 14 days quarantine, there is a government facility that is free. And for this, there is no reservation. So we won't know whether you arrive there, will there be any vacancies left? We won't know. The only time that you will know if there is any vacancy is that when you've already reached the Philippines. Yes, so anyway, for the government facilities, you'll just have to proceed at the Department of Tourism desk at the airport, and then you will be assigned in a quarantine facility for free designated by the Philippine government. So again, depending on room availability, you may be assigned at the following facilities or hotels. So the first up is in NCR, in Nice Hotel Monumento, Chill Hotel Monumento, nice hotels in MacArthur, in Arayat, and there's also in Region 4A in Canyon Woods, Canyon Cove, Chateau Royale, Summit Ridge, and Apuliana Hotel. There were issues about these government facilities early on when the travel ban was implemented. However, there were also good feedbacks with the government facility. Now, we had one of our friends of subscriber in this channel is now staying in a free government facility. She was generous enough to show us a short clip of her free government facility. So let's watch this short video of hers.
Room tour po tayo sa quarantine facilities na provided by the government sa mga dumating na umuwi ng galing ibang bansa. Ito po yung room na pinagdalhan sa amin. Ito po, oh. Yan. Yan. Ang view namin. Ito po ang bed. Ito po. Yan. CR. Yan. Yan po. CR malinis. Po siya. Lakas ang tubig. Ang food, okay naman po ang food. Ito ang hapon ko ngayon. Adobo.
So I hope this video gave you clarification for those who are planning to go home to the Philippines, especially if you're coming from a banned country. Yes, your quarantine is extended. It's going to be 14 days, and it will even take up to 15 days because the first day is not counted. We don't know when this travel ban will end. They say January 31, but we can't know for sure, as this was supposed to finish last January 15. If there's any changes with the quarantine rules, we'll make an update about that, so make sure that you watch our videos. That is all for the quarantine facilities. Again, stringent and mandatory quarantine. Stringent if you have COVID symptoms, or if you are arriving and you are coming from a country that is under the travel ban. Okay, these countries. And mandatory quarantine if you are coming from a country not under the travel ban, like New Zealand, Mexico, where else? I can't think. And if you have no COVID symptoms, you just stay there 1 to 2 days. And both of these hotels are at your own cost. And if you are coming from a country that is under the travel ban and you're in a tight budget, or if you wanted to save some money, you can stay in a government facility, again subject to availability. Okay, subject to availability. So I can't promise that everyone can avail of the government facility, because it is again subject to availability. So that is all for this video, friends. Again, I'll put the link in the description box, and I'll hope to see you again with another video. Don't forget to like this video. I'll see you again. Bye.